believe women should have been part of the original Mercury 7?
I believe the mission commander is always right.
She rented me an apartment, furnished it, and whenever I do something wrong, which lately feels like all the time, she tells me to go to my apartment.
Kids from all over the country are fighting to get in. There might not be an opening in the fall.
There's plenty of time.
Who won?
Oh, we did.
Damn right we did.
I have checked your son's condition, and there's nothing more.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the review we do for All Mankind, graciously produced here by Marcelo, who has always invited me onto his programs to discuss space stuff, and through that we developed and expressed our joint affection for the show For All Mankind, which is an alt history telling of the space race where the Soviets beat us to the moon. And we'll get into some details of that. But first, I want to say, first of all, thank you for always having me here. And this week I'll be tossing you the questions. So first question, how are you doing, Marcelo?
I'm good. It's a pleasure to have you back here on the channel, and I can't wait to talk about this episode. This is an episode that you and I have been teeing up since the start of the series, so I'm finally really overjoyed to finally be here to get to discuss it.
Yeah, this one really sets the tone for a lot of the rest of the story, even to where it is now after the fourth season has concluded. It deals with, and I think it might be important here to kind of caution, it deals with the loss of a child. So if you've experienced that, of course, that grief is a lot to take in. And so just go ahead then and take that caution with you. But if you're listening to this, you've watched the episode, so you might already be prepared for that. But yeah, this one deals with a whole lot of heavy stuff. And it leads us off with, after the last episode closed with the police arriving to the Baldwin home to let Kara know that something had happened. We open here in the hospital as she's waiting. We learn she's waiting to hear the initial news, the report back from the doctor.
I really, really, really sympathize with Carrie in this episode, because I really remember when waiting for the news to find out what happened to my dad after we had been called by the Florida police and we had been told that he had been involved in the shooting, but we didn't know anything for a couple hours, and we didn't find out what happened to him until a police officer came to our house and sort of told us that he had died on the table a couple hours before. And just seeing Karen sit there, I kind of got the flashes and feelings of waiting and hoping and ultimately being destroyed, finding out that my dad had died. So this episode was very affecting to me because of my personal experience.
Yeah, wow. Well, thank you. First of all, thanks for sharing that. I doubt this is the first time you've shared that story, but it's the first time that I've heard it. So I appreciate where you're able to draw a significant amount of empathy for Karen's position. And I'll touch on that to say that's, again, and this is going to be, if I'm carrying a flag for this show, it's that it's so well written. And that is another indicator of how they're able to understand what a common emotion is amongst us as humans and tap into that, and kind of, because that connects you to this show. And for me, I see things, and not that this makes me special, other than this is my channel to empathy, but having children myself, that's my framing for this is, while I haven't been in this particular situation, I've been in situations where, my kids have been in for a procedure, a surgery, where they've gone, they've been put under anesthesia. So there's this anxiety that you can't really, everyone has a way to experience it, but it's just this moment, and it's really well shown here, the way she flicks her nails, and one of them pops off because they're decorative nails. So thankfully, because boy, popping off an actual fingernail, just that works me. But watching her just and she realizes that she doesn't even know what she's doing, where she's at. And one thing to kind of just go ahead and set up where this episode goes along the way. They show her working through the 5 stages of grief through this episode. And this is the first one where it's, as the doctor comes to tell her what they think is happening, she goes through the denial. And I think you can relate to that with what you just said.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because it really took me a couple weeks to really take on the weight of what was happening to me, and like for about 2 to 3 weeks, I was sort of walking around numb, sort of just going through the motions and not really processing. And it wasn't until a couple weeks later where I in private sort of just went in my room when nobody was home, and I sort of just had myself a little cry. In a in a similar extent, there's a scene in this movie where there's a scene in this episode, which we're going to get to, where Karen can't take it anymore. She just explodes. But I love the way that they chose to shoot it, because they didn't shoot that scene in the conventional way.
Right, and I'll as they say, I'll clue our audience in a little to at least for my side of the table here, how the sausage is made. I keep a window with the episode open as we go through, so that I can visually cue myself to where we are along the way. That's how I know what questions to ask, because no matter how many times I've seen this, I'm not going to retain all that, and it's easier than taking notes.
Yeah, that's smart.
So, and we will come to that. And again, this show is so well done. As we move from Karen there into the hospital, we cut back to Ed on the moon alone. And what this does without doing it is kind of focus in on these two folks who are, one, dealing with the tragedy in the moment, and feeling that sense of aloneness because she's there alone in that waiting room, waiting to find out what happens. And then we flip to Ed on the moon, who's been alone for quite some time yet, and in his sense of waiting is waiting to be relieved so he can go home. And one of the and this is one of the themes in this episode, and having watched it a couple times in prep here, I realized that you and I have kind of talked about this outside of the context of our show. We talked about how we always kind of questioned the wisdom of whether or not they told Ed, right, or should tell Ed. And we come to that here along the way. And what I realized is that she wasn't insistent that they don't tell him at all, that she wanted to wait till there was something firm to tell. I don't think she ever intended to keep him from knowing that Shane had died. And that was always that's always what I remembered about this episode. So what do you think about that, though? Let's talk about that real quick, because it doesn't take long for that to kind of come up about how are we going to let Ed know? What do we think is going to happen to him? If you were in Ed's shoes, what would you want to do?
That's a really interesting quirk about this episode, because I'm not really sure if Karen knew what she wanted to do from the moment from the get. because I think Karen in this whole episode is a woman who is trying to process what has just happened to her. And I think that Karen, for the life of me in this episode, cannot process. Karen cannot deal. And I think that everybody having their own opinion about what they think is best for Ed to find out at the moment is completely wrong. And I do really think that the decision has to fall with Karen. But for my money, if I was on the moon alone, and I had been told that one of my family members has just died, I would feel like a rat in a mousetrap. That would be the most uncomfortable position I could be in, because here's the thing, I can't go anywhere. I have one option here. I'm going to rip my insides out, and I can't go anywhere, and if I go somewhere, I'm going to fucking die.
Right. That is definitely that would be a moment for me. And you know, in this episode, if you don't consider your own mortality, the mortality of your loved ones, and raise some dark questions with yourself when you watch a story like this, not necessarily just this episode, but this isn't the first time a story like this has been told. And if you don't start to wrestle with those questions, how would I, what would I, and it just happened to coincide with, you know, our middle child just recently, this past weekend, went to the University of Arkansas. So he's left the nest for the first steps out into the big bad. And I kind of thought, you know, our dog especially will be 11 come February. And it just kind of was like, well, you know, more than any time, the potential that you know, something might happen while he's away at school. And so I asked, because, you know, now's the time to know. And I said, and he didn't hesitate. He said, "You better tell me." You know, and that's completely different because it's only a few hours drive. It's not the moon. But I don't think I would want to know till I got home. I would much rather process the anger of having been not told for some period of time than I think I could process the grief alone on a place like the moon.
And the type of individual that Ed is, telling him in this high pressure situation with him alone on Jamestown is not a very good idea.
No.
Because the last thing that you want to do is tell an astronaut that a family member has died when they're on the moon by themselves. They can't, like I just said a couple of seconds ago, they can't process. And look, I'm not saying that Ed is suicidal. I bet you that when he was finally told in this moment, I bet you that maybe the thought in his head could have possibly ran through, if I just open this door, I'll just float outside and it'll all be over.
Boom, bang, and it's done. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'll be with Shane at some point. Look,
right.
That wasn't said in this episode, but I bet you a character like Ed had that thought running through his head at some point.
And we'll come to you know, by the end of this episode, the writers give us an interesting way for Ed to deal with this news, that he, in a way that he's not alone, but he's not with someone that, as you might expect, and we'll come to that. And the other thing that I wanted to kind of touch on that you brought up in a way is what Karen is doing through all of this. The one that she is out of control now, and that's not means that she is out of control, but control is out of her hands, right? She's, as we've learned, very much about being on task, the managerial person, and we'll see that grow throughout the series as well. But this is Shane's accident, Shane's trauma, and ultimately Shane's death is completely outside of her control. It's not something that she can influence. But whether or not Ed learns about it is. So that's this one piece in this whole tragedy in the moment that she can control. right? And she's hell or high water not going to let that go. And one thing I do want to note, and all of them come along the way. We get Marge and we get the other young wife that we've seen a couple of times. That was the wife of the other astronaut that went with Molly and Ed. And then we see Tracy's there right away to support Karen. And the way that they all kind of circle around her when things are tough, or they make sure that they're helping her take care of the things while she deals and processes, is a really cool element to that. But Tracy in this part of, or helping Karen with this, shows herself to be a really good friend.
Yeah, you're right. Deke is there, Deke's wife is there, and the wife of the other astronaut who went up with Molly and Ed a couple episodes ago is there. But I think that Tracy really shows herself to be a dear friend in this episode. And Tracy in this episode is Karen's ride or die person. Tracy is there from moment one, and Tracy is with Karen this entire episode.
Well, and that element is easy to overlook because it's by natural consequence that Karen and Tracy would be tight, right? Because Ed and Gordo are, like you just said, ride or dies, and having contemporary children, and just the nature of how astronaut wiving was. It's easy to miss the fact that they really were close already, right? This is just best friends best friending together, and it's easy to miss because it's so much more focused on when it's like Ed and Gordo. It is so much more of that hard charging cowboy, hard riding type vibe that that is the punch in the face text of it, and it's easy to miss that subtext that no, like Tracy would be her fallback, her backup, her go-to in these kinds of things, and vice versa as well. And then again, like you said, we see the contrast of she understands that Ed would lose control, in the sense of losing control, if he were to know and not be able to have some effect on this as well. And we'll have a chance to come back to the meat and potatoes of what Shane's death does overall. But there are some other things in this episode that get talked about and set up. It's we have the crew for the rescue mission at 24, Apollo 24, well, not rescue, but the resupply relief mission, Apollo 24, is supposed to go up. And Deke has spotted himself on the capsule along with our friend Ellen and Harry Lou, which we meet up with them while they're on a talk show. And the host there is just, he's a model of the time. He asks a lot of really just, misogynist questions that I think overall, because he keeps deferring to Deke, of course. And I feel like Deke handles that overall pretty well. But what do you think about that scene with the TV host?
That scene with the TV host, I swear to God, I wanted to hit the guy in the face, because I'm like, really? Can you be any more like you have like an agenda right now? And the fact that Ellen is the commander of the mission, right?
Right.
Ellen's the captain of the ship, and this TV host was targeting most of his questions towards Deke. But listen, I will give Deke credit and I will give him props, because when this TV host, who obviously had an agenda, asked Deke what does he think about women in space and should women go to space, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't quick to answer. His answer was very, very democratic.
Yeah, very well considered.
Deke doesn't come off as an individual, to me at least, that would have a problem with women in space, but his answer kind of said that he wasn't really in favor with it. He was sort of like in the middle, kind of.
Well, and I think that is him playing, at this point in our story, Deke has been a part of the bureaucratic side of NASA, as it were, than the action side, being chief of astronaut office, assigning the missions. He's been the stop and go for who goes up and who doesn't, and so he does believe in the hierarchy of the mission, and so he will stand behind his commander because he's the one that put her there. And so if he didn't believe that, and he's even said it himself, or it's been in the dialogue, that he didn't see it male, female, one way or the other. They did the work. They earned the pin, right? They are astronauts because they proved themselves to be of the metal it takes to be an astronaut. They just also happen to have boobs or not. So it's just a matter of who's qualified for the mission, and he sees it that way. But also having had to play the game of glad handing and keeping certain demographics, appeased, he plays like you said, the diplomatic, the democratic answer of, well, the mission commander is always right, which is the cordial way, akin to, you'll hear certain partners or husbands say, happy wife, happy life, that sort of thing, right? Don't rock the boat. You just kind of, and so, yeah, I agree with you. He's hedging his bet. He's towing a line, but that's because he has to. But he gives a ultimately supporting and correct answer. So there's that at least. But yeah, and of course, the host gets on our nerves the way he does because he's written to, but that, while I'm not old enough to have seen shows that show was mimicking, there are plenty of clips on YouTube, and there's one, and I'm just going to draw this because there is a loop here. There's a clip of Lucille Ball being interviewed on a show very similar to this, where the host is reaching out to folks in the audience, and the host continuously puts his hands on the young ladies that he's trying to ask questions of, and Lucille Ball is continuously saying, "Hey, get your hands off of her. There's no reason to put your hands on her. Why are you, So, Lucille being key to why we were able to have Star Trek for as long as we did, and then of course this show being made by a lot of people from Star Trek. But that woman in charge thing, that doesn't bother Deke so much. We'll see in the next episode, though, how his story plays out in full. But we move from that to Ed making a discovery as he is continuing to do his job on the moon. He comes across what seems to be a hidden device in the mining area that they're doing, where we're still hunting for the water, and he comes across that, and he leaves it there for the time being. If I recall correctly, hadn't he already recently left a camera behind, or will he be leaving a camera behind of our own?
No, he actually left the camera behind of her own.
So he did that first. So this is
he did that first.
Yeah, this is a little get back.
Yeah, a little get back.
I mean, it's kind of this is a setup scene. This gives us something to pay off later down the road, and then we come back to the current iteration of one of our Midland characters for now, and that's Alita, being given the opportunity to go to a really prestigious high school to help her achieve her goal of engineering, becoming an engineer and such. And we kind of have another moment with Aledia and Margot here. Margot is always good, right? The actor here always delivers on Margot. But the scenes with the younger versions of Aleida are always just a little
off.
Yeah, just a little off, and I don't think it isn't to the talent of the young actor who's playing Alita. It's more about the chemistry isn't there in the way that it will be with the older actor in the next season. Because this version, this iteration of Alita, the younger version, does a lot of they do the groundwork to get us there, and when she's when it's just herself. There's no weirdness to it. It's not off, but the chemistry between the two doesn't play here for me. Do you get that vibe?
First of all, as you know, Dan, I am no fan of young Aleda at all. You know that. But I will say, I will give you this though. I find Margot's take on this offer that Aleda has as completely insensitive because Margot basically says you have to give up your entire life to go to this school, and I don't give a shit what you think. Either you do this or you don't. So I find Margot's insensitivity really concerning in this moment. But it makes sense because Margot wasn't raised by a loving father. She was raised by herself. It would make sense that she doesn't have that understanding of, oh, this is just a young girl seeing a guy. You know, it's not. It's like she doesn't work for NASA yet.
Right.
And I find the way that Margot rang her out was completely. I think it was a bit too much. Do you feel that way, or do you think I'm just giving a lot of shit to Margot in this moment?
No, I think the point you make is incredibly valid. And why I do is you touched on it just a bit. You know, Margot wasn't raised by a loving father in so much as, you know, that story is covered in earlier episodes. She was raised, you know, by herself, like you said, and the influence of Von Braun. But what we see here, I think, towards Aleda is projection. She doesn't want, she sees so much of herself and so much, maybe even more potential raw talent, as it were. Like, I think Margot is someone, and there are some things that I hope to highlight in future episodes because I did a little forward watching because I got stuck in a binge, and so I did a lot of catching ahead just because it's such a great show. But Margot is very much tediously task oriented, right? She excels because she drives herself. She would be good at almost any process driven thing. She is a brilliant mathematician and engineer, but that's because she just decided that's what she was going to do. She could have done probably any number of other things. Alita, and this is where Margot is frustrated and also wants to push her harder. She has the raw talent to be an engineer, and that's different than having the tenacity to become an engineer, right? You can see engineering from two perspectives in a lot of ways, to my mind, and that is as an art and as a science. And purely as a science, it's always going to work. But if you have someone like Alita who can see the art and the science together, then you get beautiful working things, right? And that is where Margot sees that in her and is projecting onto her. Let me put it this way. I don't think she doesn't want Alita to have to wait as long as she did, as Margot herself did, to be in a position of leadership. She's pushing her to seize all of this because she doesn't want to see Alita waste time, as it were, as she's felt she had. Does that make sense?
No, that's a great point, and I really, really enjoyed the way that you broke down Margot's thought process as opposed to Aleda's thought process. But I do feel another thing that I want to mention without going into too many spoilers here. I think that Margot sees Aleda as an opportunity to do something right, to do something to do. I think that Margot sees Aleda as an opportunity to do what her father didn't do for her.
Exactly. But she doesn't have the gentle hand or the guiding kind of hand. She has a very firm hand because that's what she knows. Mm-hmm. And that's how she gets stuff done as in her role at NASA. Right. And again, kind of to Margot, very logical. Aleda, capable of logical processes, but sees it all through emotion. And that's where, like, I think I never really considered the Aleda character, one up or down one way or the other, because I kind of always saw myself in that same space, where I can do logical things, but I'm going to react through emotion first, and that's why it's about the boy. The boy isn't the logical, and Margot's like, that's not logical, right? This amazing opportunity that I just so happen to have been able to lay at your feet, is obviously more important than some boy, right? But not when you're 14, 15, however old she is in this part of the show. And I mean, on top of the hormone changes, you're infatuated and you're being asked to make very large, life affecting changes, when and then on top of her home life, which isn't bad, but it's very crowded, because they live in a single unit with a lot of people, which tells its own story. But yeah, I think Margot's putting a lot of her own projection into these moments with her, especially at this point.
The other thing that just came to my mind as you were talking there, the other thing was like, Margot doesn't have a life. Margot
Right.
has nothing. The only thing that she has is Nessa. That's it.
Yep.
Margot has no friends. She doesn't have a love interest. She has nothing.
She has the 11:59 Club where she plays smooth jazz to
Right,
no
that's
one
it.
that knows her.
That's it.
And threatened with bodily harm the two people that found her.
Right, that's right. But yeah. Margot,
But yeah, that's
Margot,
literally
yeah,
all she does outside of work.
yeah. Margot is the last person that would understand what Aleda is going through at this moment, being at the tender age that she's at. So
Yeah.
that's another thing to consider.
Well, and I mean, to kind of drive that point home, and then we'll let Margot rest, because Lord knows she never gets any on her own. I mean, when we meet Margot, we're very confused as to what's happening, because she's kind of hide sleeping in her office as it is at her job. So, like you said, she never quits. She's always working, and there's a scene. It's not a spoiler. I'm going to go ahead and talk about it just real quick, because it points to her efficiencies and her logistics. There's a scene coming up. I think it's in the next season, but she's brushing her teeth. And if you're not paying attention, of course, the first time around, you're not going to see it, but she's brushing her teeth and she's holding a clipboard, and then she stops brushing her teeth and turns it around, and it's a pencil taped to the other end,
Yeah.
or a pen or whatever. So she's doing math and taking notes while brushing her teeth. And she's just decided, well, it's easier if I just put a toothbrush on or a pencil on my toothbrush. Like, that's some innovative thinking. We're closing in towards the end of the episode. Things are ramping up and winding down, ramping up in emotion and winding down in the sense of the episode, as we kind of come, what we have come to here is previously, through here, Karen has a call back when they're kind of debating when and how will they tell Ed what's going to be the steps to take. It's before the Karen being, a mother who doesn't want to accept the reality of what may have happened, is relying on the idea that, she's been told that Shane has suffered a brain death, which means the machines are essentially breathing for him, and there's no cognitive activity, nothing that can be detected. But at this time in the shows in the mid-70s, this is all new with little understanding. So she's more easily able to reject, quote unquote, the science of it, because it's new, right? Oh, well, you don't know what you're talking about. This is the bargaining stage. As I mentioned before, the 5 stages of grief are pretty well laid out here, if you understand what those are. But she's in that bargaining phase of, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I happen to know the best neuro person in the entire world because he works at NASA, where my husband works, who's on the moon right now. And she kind of plays that whole, I know better than you because I know someone better than you, which is perfectly valid and entirely what a parent or anyone trying to save anything they value would do. I'm going to get the best possible answer. And so while in that interim, she is due for a call with Ed that she never misses. And, she's like, I have to make the call because they're all like, oh, you don't have to. And she's like, no, if I don't, he'll know something's wrong and we're not going to tell him yet. So she goes and, man, talk about a dude playing a dude who's playing another dude. The actor has to act inside of Karen, acting like nothing is wrong, right? And does a remarkable job of us as the audience knowing the truth and watching that truth hide behind her face while still, not cluing Ed into that something may be amiss, right? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that scene is particularly fantastic because I love the way that the actress who plays Karen plays it. Because as Dan just pointed out, the scene is very still, and Karen just, I mean, there's a moment when she's talking to Ed and she's telling Ed that Shane's basketball team won the game, but there's a moment when she stops, and Ed just she stops for a quick second and she says nothing, and she's just looking at Ed. And Ed picks up on it and goes, what's wrong? And Karen sort of turns her machines back on again, and he says, oh, I'm just tired. But the acting by the actress who plays Karen in that moment is wonderful because it's all behind her eyes. Like Dan just pointed out. It's fantastic. And I would just like to say a really quick moment on something that Dan just said a couple of moments ago when Karen moves to the bargaining stage of dealing with grief. That was very, very affecting to me because a member in my family, when my grandmother passed away, we had her on life support for about 4 or 5 days. And a member of my family goes, oh, she'll be fine. We could just, we could just buy machines and have somebody come to the house, 5 days a week to make sure that she's okay. And it took like 6 of us to make that individual in my family realize that, no, this is not good. She is gone. We were like, the lights are on, but nobody's home. So it's either go into bankruptcy and see this shell of a person that we all used to love, or we can let it go right now, but we can't, this is not acceptable. You have to get out of the belief that everything is going to be okay, because everything is not going to be okay.
And anyone who's ever dealt with sudden loss, lead up loss is different, right? When someone's time is approaching,
you get ready
different.
For it.
You can brace for it, right? It's still going to affect you differently than you think than you have prepared for, but you are prepared, right? Mm-hmm. To some extent, it's still going to punch, but a sudden loss is a different kind of. You enter that bargaining stage in the panic of it, where in that lead up grieving, you've already bargained. Right? You've okay, well, we can't do that. Okay, well, we can't do this. Okay, that's okay. Well, here we are. But when it's so sudden and you feel like control's been out of your hands, there might be another thing that we can try. You're going to want to latch onto that. But like you mentioned, at a certain point, it's not the person you loved. It's just the thing that they were. Right. And that is particularly difficult to come to terms with, I think, as humans, because it's the reason we're human beings is that we put so much of ourselves into the people and the things that we love, that when we have that loss, it literally takes a piece of us with them, and we don't want its selfishness. We don't want to let that go. And that's okay, right? It's okay. It's okay to be disappointed that a loved one is gone. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to be sad. You just have to find a healthy way to process that. And I think we learn through later on that maybe these folks didn't process in a healthy way. But we cut back to Ed on the moon, not knowing, I don't believe yet, that the actual news.
No, he doesn't.
He's just busting up the equipment because he's busting up the equipment.
Yeah, he's pissed. Yeah.
But it plays well in that moment of Karen realizing that that it's the visual cue that things are shattered now, and nothing's going to be the same. And one thing we didn't touch on, Gordo goes to the shrink, as they call it in the show, and has his visit with with the doctor. And if I recall, this is where Tracy accuses him of being out late, but he admits to her that he was at the doctor.
Yeah, I look. I have been ribbing Gordo a new one for weeks now. Dan will attest to this. And if you've been listening to the show, you know this. I was very, very proud of Gordo in this moment, because Gordo could have come back to Earth and fallen back into the same pattern, but for him to acknowledge that there is a problem, that there is an issue, and I really like the fact that he's trying to get over that issue and he's starting to deal with it. But on that same sort of line, it's really distressing to me that when Tracy finds out that Gordo's going to a psychiatrist, and she says to him, "Why didn't you tell me? I could help you. I could help you with what you're going through. All you need to do is tell me." And there's this moment when Gordo goes, "No, I can't really do that." And and that to me that hurts my soul, because that shows us that these two people, although they love each other greatly, they do, but that shows to me that there's a distance between the two of them.
Yeah, I think I'm going to pick apart something that kind of in all of that. What we could take from this is, first of all, admitting that he's going to seek this help is one thing. He's already let one guard down. Then the other side of that, if he had gone to Tracy first for advice or help or whatever the case may be, he would have shown weakness to her, exposed himself as unable to deal with something, an aspect of being an astronaut that she's fine with, not having had the same experience. But, there's a lot of that, and just then churning in his own self-doubt. So the fact that he would be unwilling to relate that to her, and like you said, they love each other, two people who love each other, but somehow fail to support each other, right? Does that sound right?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that a large part of that goes into, if I just could here, I think a lot of that goes into the fact that Gordo is the one that created most of the wedge in between the two of them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the fact that she reaches out and he still doesn't turn away, but doesn't receive, right? He makes an excuse for, oh well, it would have been XYZ. And where these two go, all of this comes to a crushingly beautiful point. But watching these moments where it pays off serious in the future, again, testimony to the creative team. That includes the folks, the writers, producers, and the actors who put this show together. Absolutely, just phenomenal. We do end up closing out or coming to Karen eventually having to accept the reality that Shane has passed, and she is going to bring that news to Ed. And as we've discussed up to this point, would you or wouldn't you? And how's our man going to deal with it, right? And the thing is, they've set this up. Contraband on the moon. They have booze. They have liquor, which may not always be the best plan when one wrong turn and it's literally all the air leaves the room. But it comes in, and we finally have to break it to Ed, along with the fact that the resupply and relief mission is still yet to be ready to go. and he has the reaction I think that a lot of us would. He goes to just hit that bottle and try to process that in the moment. Um, and then back home or back on Earth, Karen goes again into the things that she can control, and that is what does it take? What all does she have to do to handle the aftermath of losing Shane? What do you think of those two contrasts where we see a moment, of course, we see Ed having to come to terms and lose control as Karen finds a way to regain some control?
I really, really love the way that the writers and the director of this episode set this moment up, because Ed comes into Jamestown and Karen is already on the screen, on the video screen, and the moment is played completely silently.
Mm-hmm.
There's no dialogue shared between the two of them, and you just see Joel Kinnaman as Ed sitting there watching Karen on the screen back on Earth, and they fall apart together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just a heartbreaking, lovely artistic. It's such an artistic way to show the moment being played.
Some
It's
serious storytelling.
absolutely wonderful. And to your point, back on Earth, Karen goes back into the things that she can control. So there's this really quick scene when Karen and Tracy come back to Karen's house after coming back from the hospital, and Karen, for the life of me, can't get her keys out of her purse. And God bless Tracy, she just sees that Karen can't do it right now. She says, "Give me the keys." She opens the door to Karen's house and they go in. And then later on, they have this discussion on, or Tracy sees that Karen is sort of like she's trying to stay busy, right? She's trying not to think about it. And Tracy goes, "Karen, honey, it's okay to deal with it."
Yeah, it's okay to let go.
Yeah. And
Kind
Karen
of gives her permission.
to let go.
Yeah.
And Karen goes, "No, I have to do this."
Yeah.
Um,
Because she has some sense of having to hold it together for Ed, for herself, for
right.
this. She knows this is what she can do right now. I guess probably on
Right.
some level too.
Right. And the scene just ends with them sitting on the bed with Karen going through her Rolodex, trying to figure out how she's going to get the funeral arrangements done for Shane, which is awful.
Right. And but also it's something that she can do in this moment. Um, I just couldn't imagine. I really couldn't imagine what it would be to have to work through this, and for Ed to have to go through it alone on the moon. But one thing, and you've mentioned it a couple of times, and I took note of it as I went through cutting together the pre-roll. Um, Typically, there's a lot to have to duck under or get processed out to drop dialogue and such over the main music bed that the show's theme. This episode needed none of that because there is almost no what you would consider a score. It's all background audio or dialectic music, diegetic music, um, and but very little of an underlaying score, which made it incredibly easy to drop in, and do the edit. But also that caught my attention, not only while watching, but I was like, wow, it relies on the absence of something, um, which kind of gives, in a metaphysical, now that I'm talking it out in a metaphysical kind of way, the absence of that anticipated score, that anticipated audio in the background, kind of reinforces, underlies that sense of loss that the episode deals with. Not to get too philosophical, but
This episode is very quiet.
yeah.
It really reminded me. I mean, I mean, I might be dating myself here, but it really reminded me of an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer called The Body.
I'm in 100% agreement.
Okay. If you watch that episode is nothing but the actors acting, and there's no music in that episode whatsoever. So when I was watching this episode, that's like something that I noticed right away. I was like, this is the For All Mankind folks trying to do their version of The Body.
You talk to any number of artists, especially folks who work in kind of a visual medium, drawings or cartoon work, things like that. A lot of what you're looking for is in the negative space. It's in what's left out. It's in what's, what they call the subtext, what wasn't said. And this episode is built on that. And that is not easy to do, doubly so considering the topic at hand. That grief, loss, and control narrative, and to land it, and this is just commentary on the show as a whole. There may be some in the 3 and 4 seasons, but the lack of what would traditionally be, filler episodes, some to the nature of a 10 episode season, but also to the fact that they have the economy of storytelling nailed down on this in a way that it itself is an art form.
Yeah, no, the writers for All Mankind are very, very good at making episodes around the things that they need to. They do a really good job at their story progression throughout the seasons. Mm-hmm. There are some episodes in the later seasons where I go, did you really need this episode about this one guy who I don't really like and who I want to punch through a wall? But still, I see why you did it. So I really marvel at the way that the writing staff can do story progression, because there's almost not a wasted episode in the series so far.
I was going to touch on the same thing there. I've never come away scratching my head with why did you do that, for the most part, and I haven't ever come away mad for having spent my time watching it. And I can't say that for every episode of every show I've ever watched. And this one's pretty high up there on the man. They all count. You can't skip an episode, and the show just keeps getting better. To that point, that leads us into what we'll be talking about next time, which would be the next episode For All Mankind, I believe, is Bent Bird. That finally gets us onto a rescue mission. But that is not today. That will be at our point in the future. So again, fair listeners, fair viewers, if you enjoy what we do here, you can find us on various other places. Marcelo, where might folks find you to learn more and engage more with what you do?
Yeah, well, guys, if you want to find me and you want to talk about For All Mankind and the seasons we haven't covered yet, you're more than welcome to do that. The best place to do that for me would be on X or Twitter, if you still call it that. I'm at CreekFanatic88.
Fantastic. And for myself, you can find me on almost every platform available with the handle DANDECKR. But you can also find all of that at linktree/DECKR Media. That's linktree/Decker Media. And there at the top of that link tree is a link to a t-shirt store where you can find a t-shirt for this show. Looks like the NASA orb, the little NASA globe, and it has the letters FAM for All Mankind, and for FAM, as in family, which you all are to us. And if you choose to support the show, Marcelo and I split the goods, so that we each might be able to buy half of a sandwich. Because we're not trying to get rich, we're just trying to have some fun. And with that, I believe we're going to bring this episode to a close. Again, thank you to everyone who's chosen to come hang out with us and to watch along as we do. I will say peace and long life.
So much happened here, and so much is about to.